And lastly, we'll share our last analysis project with you. And this was something that we just recently finished with the financial services industry in the state of Washington. And once again, the Workforce Development Council was at the cornerstone of this effort in providing some grant funding to really kickstart this analysis project. Enterprise Seattle came in and along with the Washington Economic Development Commission, the City of Seattle, and King County. But really it was sparked by our Workforce Development Council. So what we wanted to make sure that we did in this financial services analysis really was to leverage the fact that Russell Investments has relocated their corporate headquarters in downtown Seattle. In addition, we wanted to make sure to highlight the fact that J.P. Morgan has a much bigger presence in our state. And frankly, we wanted to change the story from just that Washington Mutual has closed down to really stress some of the great things that are happening in the financial services sector in our region. And frankly, an analysis of this industry cluster had never been done before. So we did a quantitative analysis and learned that we have over 130,000 jobs in the state of Washington focused in this space. Qualitatively, we learned that there are great advantages, but also challenges in our community related to this industry. We did 50 interviews with industry executives, and we learned about the innovation that takes place here and how that's one of the strongest selling points for our community. We also learned about our strong connections to Asia and how that lent itself to the growth of this industry cluster. We released these findings at a large-scale event as well, with over 200 executives in place, learning about the industry. And something that we wanted to focus on as well was that this wasn't just about Wall Street jobs. This wasn't what we like to call the gold cufflink jobs, but this was really about middle wage jobs as well. And as you can see, with over 130,000 jobs in the state of Washington, those jobs are across the spectrum. And we'll be posting this analysis along with all of the other analysis on the website so that you can see for yourself the work that's been conducted.
And these are three such unique examples in terms of industries that you wouldn't necessarily think about offhand. And I think one of the other great things that happened through this collaboration was our board of directors at the Workforce Development Council got to ask Enterprise Seattle and WDC staff a lot of the hard questions up front before funding such a study to make sure we were looking at wages that were self-sufficient. We were looking at a wide range within each of these three particular industries of different kinds of jobs that could be entered at different levels and with different levels of training. So again, the collaboration really worked well for us here. I'll jump into program data results. We do tend to talk about results because it's great to have events and it's great to do studies, but what does it come out to? So we certainly look at these kinds of products that have been generated. The career map, again, mapyourcareer.org. The fact that we both know each other's and our own value proposition in terms of workforce development is economic development, and economic development is workforce development. We understand that at any given moment there are jobs that go unfilled in any economy, which is such an irony, because of human capital not being at the ready. So if Jeff, as he has, and I congratulate him on this, brings a new company to town or retains a company, our role at the workforce development side needs to be to have that human capital ready. So we've learned how to do that in a much faster and real-time basis. It changes all the time, so we have to keep up on it all the time. And again, some specific recruitment successes have come out of this. See Beyond was one that came to town a couple of years ago, and Enterprise Seattle brought See Beyond to the Factoria area of King County, and that's 200 some jobs that the Workforce Development Council was then able to come in from behind and do some training on. So that really does show the example of the great partnership.
And just to dovetail onto that in relation to some of the other data results, I think we've gotten exactly what we wanted out of this project, out of these projects. We understand who we are. We understand that what we add to these industry niches, and they've also allowed us to measure the interest from the private sector when we've done these analysis. It's important to understand how bought they are, how bought in they are to this process and to growing their own industry, because as everyone knows, we can only do so much as the Workforce Development Council and the Economic Development Council. The private sector really has to step up and play a major role, and in all of these analyses they've been very engaged and are ready to take the next step. As I said earlier, we've been able to build new relationships with industry as a part of these processes. For example, we built new collaborations with Russell Investments and J.P. Morgan Chase and Washington Federal and others just related to the financial services sector. We're working with organizations that we never have before, including Goldman Sachs and Deloitte Touche and BlackRock and Rainier Funds and many others. And these are all relationships that were built out of this specific project focused on the financial services community, and that's just one example. Let me share with you some of the lessons learned about all of these projects and something to consider when a community wants to undertake this kind of effort. We really leverage the strength of our Workforce Development Council. Our partners know so much about the grant world, and as I said, they were really lit the fire. They were the spark that started a lot of this economic analysis activity, and that in part came from labor market research grants, and that was such a critical part of this. But one of the things I'm thrilled about is that we are now collaborating more closely than we ever have. And that's a strong result of this effort. We've done a quantitative and qualitative analysis of all of this on all of these projects, and that's done a couple things. One, having a strong relationship with an economist that can tell us what the quantitative numbers are in terms of data as it relates to each one of these industries was really important. But being engaged in the qualitative aspect was absolutely just as important, and that is what's led us to understanding what's actually happening in the industries, to building those kind of relationships that we've thought was so important. It's also important to note that these are, you've always heard me reference these as analysis, not studies, and that's in some ways because I think when you say the word study, it lends itself to a never-ending process. Our private sector partners find it very important that there's a beginning, middle, and end to these kinds of efforts, and that's the only way that they would ever want to get engaged. So when we position this as an analysis, this is a short time frame effort that really is just the beginning. We also kept an eye on what makes our community unique when we've gone through this process. We've tried to look at what our storyline is as a community. We've also worked hard to make sure that there were other partners that have been engaged in this effort beyond the Workforce Development Council and the Economic Development Council. We've worked hard to make sure that there was a PR strategy embedded in this. And that helps us as you're trying to build a coalition for the next stages of any kind of economic development, workforce development effort. And as I said earlier, this is really just the beginning of this kind of work. This lays the foundation. It's the platform that we can then build workforce development programs and economic development programs on.
I'll just add to that, Jeff, that we've said it already, but I think it bears repeating that both organizations really do operate from that perspective that the success of our own organization and our own community is really predicated on the success of the other organization. And one way we both think about this in terms of our leadership and our board members is resources are so limited regardless of where you're looking for them, whether it be in the federal resources, state, local, private sector, that we make sure that our impact is a burst of impact at the right time, in real time, in an efficient way, in the most efficient way. And those are the things we keep in mind, I think, in any undertaking.
Now let me share with you the value of this collaborative approach to doing this kind of analysis work. As I said earlier, these kinds of projects have pulled the Workforce Development Council and Enterprise Seattle more closely together than ever before. We worked in partnership previously, but never like we are doing now. Right now we have staff that work almost on a daily basis with each other, which has been an enormous strength. But this is also a data-driven approach. There's no more guesswork as it relates to what companies need or what's driving our economy, and that's been incredibly liberating from both organizations. It's also served multiple purposes. These analyses have served multiple purposes, including understanding what we have as an economy, but improving workforce training efforts, being responsive to employers, driving new programs to help the industry, promoting the community to businesses, but also to individuals that want to enter these industries, educating the general public and policymakers about why these individual industries are so good for our economy. And frankly, it's raised the profile of the Workforce Development Council and Enterprise Seattle. It's generated a fair bit of recognition for us.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
So let me share now with you what's next. So You heard me earlier reference our regional economic development strategy that was conducted just a few years ago, the Prosperity Partnership. And now it's in the midst of going through an update. And we're excited because now that regional strategy is looking at sub-cluster data. They're looking at niche data that we have been looking at over the last few years, and we're excited to be a part of this process as it's moving forward for the 4-county area. In addition, let me share with you some of the industry cluster activity that's happening as a result of this, and I'll just share with you what's related to the financial services sector. We're splitting now into 4 working groups. Industry is now committed to diving into and helping grow the industry in 4 ways. One, looking at regulatory issues, looking at further analysis into the subsectors of that industry cluster, identifying workforce and higher education needs in the industry, and also what needs to be done to market and promote the financial services community at large. And all of these are going to be chaired by the private sector. Industry has taken the driver's seat and wants to move this effort forward. And that's exactly what we had anticipated and what the goal of this project was. In addition, what we're trying to look at now is opportunities for cross-sector collaborations and skills evaluations. And these are skill sets that are transferable from one niche to another. And I'll give you just one industry cluster example, and that's in the fashion and apparel industry, where technology applications now have and drive the fashion and apparel industry and are lending itself to the success of our fashion industry locally. In addition, our expertise in international trade and logistics is one of the major reasons why we're now a growing fashion center. And lastly, I'll share that the fashion and apparel industry actually works very closely with our local military industry. And that's because some of the apparel and design work that's done for the military is done here, so that you'll see that there's a lot of crossover between these niche industry clusters. And those are just we've just scratched the surface, and we're excited to dig a little deeper to identify more opportunities there.
And I'll just add, Jeff, to the point about our organizations becoming stronger because of this, and hopefully certainly more cutting edge as we continue our work. Because of all this great foundational work on industry clusters, et cetera, the Workforce Development Council has decided to undertake a talent development pipeline study to forecast where are the jobs out 5 years and where should we be investing, again, our limited resources in the training for those jobs. So I would really say that this great work in our partnership has laid the foundation for the talent development pipeline as well.
And with that, you'll see our contact information, and please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to share more detail about some of the programs and projects that we've worked on, some of the best practices and some of the pitfalls to be avoided. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.